Parafilm. I love a lot of things in the lab. My absolute favorite thing is parafilm. Here are some cool things that you can do with it. So parafilm is basically like a super duper like heavy duty saran wrap that is way better. You could not do this with saran wrap. I read that it stretches up to like 200 times its length. It's really helpful for a variety of things, including wrapping Petri dishes, like covering to mix solutions, mixing other things, loading preparing Agarose Gel samples. And so here, just a quick demo of some of these various things that you can do with parafilm. First things first, you need a lot less parafilm than you actually think you do. So it comes in like these boxes like this. As for the M, so it's technically parafilm N, and like no one seems to know what that M stands for, so don't ask me. I've tried figuring it out and I have no clue. But basically it has like these big rolls, and these, you cut off the length that you want. They make like fancy cutters, but I've never gone wrong with scissors. Cuts pretty easily. And like I said, way better. You could not stretch this 200 times. I can't even stretch it like 2 seconds. It's also hydrophobic, so it's like water repelling. It's made of like waxes and olefins, which are these like hydrocarbon compounds. So basically hydrogen and carbon. They're really boring to water, so water doesn't want to hang out with them, and so water is going to like ball up if you try to put water on it, or any sort of aqueous solution. It's not going to stick. It's going to bead up, and so this is going to come in really helpful. We can actually bead up the dye for loading our agarose gels, and then prepare our samples on the parafilm without having to actually like going to make a bunch of tubes. But probably one of the most common things that you'll see it is with wrapping Petri dishes. So like I say, you don't need that much. Like these things look ginormous, but you don't need to, it's not like you're like wrapping a present or anything. Like you don't measure out the amount that would go around the plate. You would have way too much parafilm. Instead, you just need like a short strip. You probably don't even need like a full strip. But you want to make it enough that it's going to like cover the edge of the plate. So you can like peel it off from the back. Typically what I do is I just like tear a little bit of it, but don't tear it too intensely, or you'll actually break the parafilm. It like stretches, but it does break eventually, like occasionally. Okay, so you want to cover the edge. So you want to hold down on one end and then kind of like gently stretch as you go. If you try to go too fast, it'll break. But if you just gently stretch, it'll work. Stretch all the way around. You want to make it so that it's sticking onto itself. It goes all the way around and sticks on itself. Now you have a nice seal. What some people like to do is to actually like fold it over. This is going to give it a little more thickness, and so make it so that it's less likely to break. And so just fold it in half, hold down one end, keep that end held down, and then just wrap all the way around till you touch. So you want to, when you're cutting it out or when you're folding it, make it so that it's not going to wrap over the top and the bottom. You just need to wrap over the seal. But then once you have the plates, what you can do is you can take a bigger piece of parafilm and actually like wrap all the way around, and now your plates will stay stacked together. And then they're individually sealed, so that's going to keep the moisture in, keep other stuff out. Okay, so what else can it keep in? Because it can keep this moisture in, what if there's something that you're wanting to mix and you need to like do it on a hot plate, and so you have the potential for evaporation, or you're doing it overnight and so you don't want just things to evaporate out? Well, what do? Parafilm. Here you will need a slightly bigger piece, but not this big of a piece. But then you can just, as long as you hold one edge of the parafilm, you can then basically like stretch it forever. And then it sticks onto itself, and voila. And it's really sturdy. In fact, I often use it to help me mix solutions. So oftentimes when I'm making a solution. So you want to dissolve the amount of solid or that sort of thing. If it's a liquid, maybe it's like glycerol or something like that. So you have some amount. When you're dissolving a solid, you want to make sure you don't overshoot it, and you're typically dissolving it in something like this, like a beaker, where these are just approximate lines. So these aren't the actual lines, and so you want to actually like make sure you don't like dissolve it in the full volume that you want, because you don't want to overshoot it, and remember that the solid's going to take up some volume, and also don't trust these lines. So basically at the end of the day, what you have to do is then put it in a graduated cylinder in order to measure it and make sure that the magnet doesn't fall out. You can take a bigger magnet, hold it on the bottom, and then pour out. But bottom line is then you fill it up, and now you have this, and it's not mixed. So what do? Well, I tell you, you take some of my favorite thing in the world, Parafilm. So you just need a piece of Parafilm, and again, just like hold one part over, stretch it over. I typically stretch it a couple times just to be sure, especially with the lip of this, it sometimes tears it. And then voila. So you can see that this had like sucrose in it. So it would show a little better. But now it's going to nicely mix these, easily mix these, and then voila, I've got my solution. Okay, and then the final thing is going to be this Agarose Gel preparation. So often we have some sort of like 6x buffer or something like that for our loading die. And so we need to prepare a sample. Say you have like 10 samples. You don't want to have to prepare like all 10 in 10 different tubes and things like that. What's nice about Agarose gels is they're really easy. You don't have to like boil them or anything. Like with SDS page samples, you couldn't do this because you have to boil them, and you're not going to want to boil the Parafilm. Although you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it, you can't boil it. But what you can do is basically, so if it's 6x, you need to add 1 microliter to 5 microliters of your sample. What you can do is, because Parafilm beads up, you can actually just take the sample dye and pipette it right on the plate. I'm doing it weirdly. Normally you would be on the surface, but you can do this and just make dots for the number of samples that you have. You can actually use like a multi-channel pipette too if you have one of those. You can add this first or second, and then basically what you just need to do is take your sample, and now you make sample drops, or you can alternatively just add directly to the dye. But I like to make sample drops because it's fun to then mix them, and then you can mix it up, down, up, down, up, down, and then go and pipette into your gel. So that's a really helpful way that you can prepare your samples, and it helps you save tubes, save time, save all sorts of stuff. So Parafilm, lots and lots of uses, and there's actually a lot of people like use it for things outside the lab. Apparently, like people wrap plant stems, like graft plants together, and they cover the stems of like fruits and stuff, or not stems, but I don't know, parts of fruit, so that they don't, because remember, it's going to keep like moisture away, so it'll keep moisture in, and therefore it'll like help the fruits grow or something. People use it, like they put it on plastic parts when they're like painting plastic parts. People use it to like feed insects in the lab. People use it for all sorts of stuff, and so really, really cool stuff that you can do with Parafilm. And these are just a few of the things that you can do in the lab. Oh, another common thing in the lab is also like keeping moisture out of bottles that are of solutions like DMSO that are hygroscopic, so that will like take water in from the environment. When you don't want that to happen, because then you have water in your solution or your solids or whatever, what you can do is you can just wrap Parafilm around the seal, and that will keep the moisture away from coming in and getting sucked into your solution or your solid or whatever, and then making the solid all clumpy, stuff like that. So Parafilm, if you're not a fan already, you're gonna be a fan.